1. Direct questioning. Asking straightforward questions to gather clear and specific information from the subject. 2. Good cop, bad cop. A tactic where one interrogator is friendly and sympathetic, good cop, while the other is aggressive and hostile, bad cop, to create pressure and confusion. 3. Reid Technique. A widely used method that involves behavioral analysis and a structured approach to persuading a suspect to confess, often including confrontation. 4. Peace method, a non-coercive interviewing technique focusing on preparation, engage and explain, account, clarification, and evaluation to promote voluntary cooperation. 5. Cognitive interview, a technique designed to enhance memory retrieval by encouraging the subject to recall details in a relaxed and open environment. 6. Rapport building, establishing a connection and trust with the subject to make them feel comfortable and more willing to share information. 7. Deception detection, techniques used to identify signs of dishonesty or untruthfulness in a subject's responses or behavior. 8. Silent treatment, using silence strategically during the interrogation to create discomfort and encourage the subject to fill the void with information. 9. Leading questions, questions that suggest a particular answer or contain information that implies what the interrogator wants to hear. 10. Prolonged interrogation, extended questioning sessions aimed at exhausting the subject to the point where they may confess or reveal information. 11. Emotional appeal, using emotional arguments or appeals to the subject's feelings to influence their responses and encourage cooperation. 12. Bluffing, intentionally misleading the subject by suggesting that the interrogator has evidence or information that they do not actually possess. 13. Confrontation, directly challenging the subject with evidence or accusations to pressure them into admitting guilt or providing information. 14. Theme development, creating a narrative or theme that makes the subject feel comfortable with confessing by rationalizing their behavior. 15. Rationalization, encouraging the subject to justify their actions or decisions as acceptable or understandable, making them more likely to confess. 16. Minimization, downplaying the severity of the crime or consequences to make the subject feel less guilty and more willing to confess. 17. Maximization, exaggerating the seriousness of the situation or potential penalties to instill fear and pressure the subject into cooperating. 18. Evidence presentation, showing the subject evidence, real or fabricated, to convince them of their guilt or to elicit a confession. 19. False confession induction, techniques aimed at leading a suspect to believe they have no choice but to confess, even if they are innocent. 20. Fear-based tactics, using threats or fear to intimidate the subject into providing information or confessing to a crime. 21. Stress position, placing the subject in physically uncomfortable positions for extended periods to induce fatigue and compliance. 22. Information leakage, subtly revealing bits of information to the subject to gauge their reactions and build a narrative around their responses. 23. Behavioral analysis, observing the subject's nonverbal cues and body language to detect signs of stress, deception, or willingness to cooperate. 24. Reverse interrogation, making the subject believe they are interrogating the interrogator, creating confusion and the illusion of control. 25. Hypothetical scenario, presenting a fictional scenario that resembles the subject's situation to provoke a reaction and extract information. 26. Time pressure, creating urgency by imposing tight deadlines to force the subject to respond quickly, often leading to mistakes or confessions. 27. Distraction techniques, diverting the subject's attention to confuse them or make them more vulnerable to questioning. 28. False information, intentionally providing misleading or incorrect information to manipulate the subject's responses or beliefs. 29. Repetition, asking the same question multiple times in different ways to identify inconsistencies in the subject's answers. 30. Subtle threats, using vague or indirect threats to suggest negative consequences for non-cooperation without making explicit demands.